Hey everybody, you are listening to Professional Development, the New York City Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Noah, and this week I'm really pleased to bring you an interview with my friend and colleague, Tyree Alexander. You might remember Tyree from episode 5 of the show, in which we discussed how he got into teaching, which was via the teacher preparation pathway, Teach for America. This week, we are catching up with him after he has won the Cognizant Innovation in Computer Science Education Award, which is quite a mouthful. This is an award that comes with a $10,000 prize for the winners. There were 5 winners selected nationally, and Tyree is a member of the inaugural class of winners of this award. It's the first time it's been given out. So we will talk about that. We'll talk about the computer science program that Tyree started at his school, which is, what led to the award. But we'll also talk more generally about what leads one as a teacher to start a program like this, something that is outside of their wheelhouse professionally, and outside of their contract area, really. Now, this is going to be another one of those 2-part episodes, so if you reach the end of part 1 and you're really enjoying it, be sure to join us at patreon.com/professionaldevelopment for part 2. And without any further ado, Tyree, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
This is a very exciting development, at least for me as an observer, and I think for all of your colleagues as colleagues and observers, to see you recognized for this achievement. That achievement, of course, being the building of this computer science program that did not exist before. And the reason it's so exciting, I think, is because it's something of a rarity for teachers to be recognized for the extra time and effort that they put into their craft that's outside of the expectations. The dialogue about teachers is usually about how we failed to meet expectations within our contract area and not how we are building things outside of our contract area. So first of all, what led you to recognize the need for a computer science program, and how did you go about addressing that need?
Got it. So one of the best things about the school that I work at is they support passion projects, and they allow teachers to develop their own curriculum in terms of electives. So if you are particularly passionate about something, or you have a particular talent in something, the school actually encourages you to share that talent in a credit-bearing course with students. So I took full advantage of that. I took full advantage of the fact that I could write a class from scratch because I'm a lifelong learner. So I wanted to essentially get paid to learn to code and do it alongside students. And I thought it was a good idea for a number of reasons. One, because students would see me struggling to learn something new. They would learn alongside me. They would sometimes figure out things before I do. And it would feel like a very different classroom than what they were used to. So truth is, I had no idea what I was doing in the beginning. I just knew that I personally wanted to code, and I knew that students were lacking seriously in basic tech skills. Just they saw computers as obstacles. Right. They wanted to avoid computers at all costs. And I could not believe that at a school that lauded its affinity to math and science, that students were vying for paper and pen as often as possible. Right. And we all know the benefits of paper and pen, but we also know that the opportunity that exists when you are familiar with tech. And I'm talking just basic typing skills were abysmal, right? Basic computer jargon was just unfamiliar and foreign to students. So between the interest that existed between students and myself for tech and the lack of basic skills, it just felt like a no-brainer. And it started as a very simple elective, but students were moving quickly. They were moving very fast. They were talking about loops and talking about iteration and talking about coding languages at a much faster rate than I was even able to like figure out. So I had to get help. I had to figure out like, how do I stay ahead of my students?
Right.
And I started dedicating my weekends and my summers to learning more, and got really, really invested in it. And because more students wanted it than I could possibly accommodate, we had to bring in more teachers and figure out how to make this thing grow and how to make it sustainable.
Right. So when you were seeking out help, and I suppose this would be interesting for anybody who is thinking specifically about computer science course development, or for someone who wants to pursue some other field that they're not familiar with, where did you go for help, and how did you go about figuring out where to go for help?
Yeah. So I truly believe in the power of networking. So it literally just started with a simple ask. Just people who I knew were working already in tech, or people who were adjacent to tech-related fields, and also just networks that I had. Particularly, I am a Teach for America alum, so I reached right back out to Teach for America because I know that they are very well connected. Reached back out to people from the college that I graduated at, and got lots of interest, lots of people who wanted to help, but not necessarily people who knew how to help.
Okay.
So, I had people who I could call who could explain concepts to me. But a lot of people were like sending me to the same websites, right? The course academies of the world, the Khan academies of the world, the code academies of the world. But when you hit a point of confusion on those websites, unlike a teacher, it doesn't explain it in a different way.
Right. Which is why you can't just send the students to Khan Academy or Code Academy or wherever.
Right. And at that time, that's a lot of computer science education looked like that.
Right.
It looked like, just go through this online module and follow these videos and replicate what you see on the screen.
And so now you understand it. Good job, everybody.
Exactly, right? And the truth is, no one understands it.
Right. And that's not, it's a non-starter. Like that, you'll just say like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to code. Do we have a Spanish elective?
Exactly, right? Students were like vying for other things after a while.
Yeah.
But after a while, it became a national conversation, and TFA got a lot of interest in it as well. So there were all types of groups popping up of people who wanted to start these computer science initiatives in their school.
This is among TFA alumni.
So I was involved in a number of them. So yes, I was involved in one specifically for a TFA alumni. I was involved in one that was funded by Microsoft. Okay. I was an early adopter of this program called Google CS First, in which they like mailed you kits and curriculum, and you figured it out from there. I was an early adopter of a program called Code Monkey, and I actually got really close with the founder of that program. And he was also teaching me quite a bit.
Code Monkey, I think, was the handle of like one of the like a QAnon adjacent thing. Is there any relation to the Code Monkey?
Quite honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know. Man. I hope not. I'm not sure if I should have said that, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised.
That would be so interesting if that's how they were. That was a tack that they were taking to radicalize the youth, to do it through. I'll follow up. Don't worry about it.
You'll have to let me know.
Just to let you know, the Code Monkey to which Tyree is referring there is a company that was developed by Jonathan Shore. Jonathan is an Israeli web developer and CEO of this company he started called Code Monkey Studios. The Code Monkey I was referring to back there was the handle for a guy named Ron Watkins, who, if you don't know, don't look into him. He's bad news.
But what was great about it was that there were lots of groups popping up all over the city trying to do the same thing.
Gotcha.
And I think New York City noticed that because not too long after, there was a huge CS for All initiative.
Okay.
So the mayor announced that, I forget what year he announced, but like by 2025, all schools will offer some type of CS programming. And basically what the city did was organized all the isolated efforts into one big citywide effort. So they took all the curriculum that was being like co-created across the city and put it up on this website that they called the Blueprint. and gave teachers spaces on the weekend to come and learn and come and collaborate and say, like, you know computer science, but you don't necessarily know pedagogy. So let's work together and figure out how to make this work.
Interesting. So they were bringing in teachers and non-teachers to.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What a interesting space. Because I think that the thing that is often missing in settings that are mostly or entirely teacher centered is that you have a lot of people who are interested in the pedagogy but are not practitioners.
Exactly.
and never were. So like
Yep.
people who are coming to math who were never mathematicians.
Exactly.
and that sort of thing. But to be in a space where the practitioners and the pedagogues are able to kind of co-create this thing that doesn't exist, that's a real asset.
Yeah. It worked very well. I mean, it grew very, very quickly. And it was necessary, I think, because all of these tech companies and all these people, all these computer scientists who wanted to like give back, they were writing curriculum already, right? But something that they would say would take 15 minutes was a 2-day exercise, right? Like
right.
It was just something like you definitely needed to curate that space for both groups of people to come together and work this out.
Yeah, they were writing curriculum in a vacuum.
Literally in a vacuum.
It needed some air.
Yes, it needed lots of air. So yeah, that's that. I mean, that's kind of the origin and the foundation of this, and it's just been growing rapidly since then.
Right. So when did the program start, and can we chart the development over time? You've taken us through sort of all of the stages, more or less, but like where did each of these stages happen on the timeline?
It's a good question. So I'm in my 10th year of teaching now. So probably around my 5th year was the first time that I got the idea to start a computer science elective. And at that time, although I was calling it computer science, it was literally just computer skills.
Gotcha.
We were measuring words per minute. We were looking at Microsoft Office.
Okay.
We were doing very basic stuff. We were discussing the difference between RAM and ROM and just like things that are kind of archaic now, right?
Right.
But once I started getting involved in these organizations, I started realizing that computer science is actually more about computational thinking and more about problem solving.
Right. Has very little to do with real computers.
Very little to do with the computer like education we had growing up, right? Like
Right.
no Mavis Beacon, right? So it was from there it developed, the curriculum developed year after year after year. So by that second year, it became more of a problem solving course. So like we weren't coding or anything just yet, but we were like solving riddles, and we were I had like this book of like questions you'll get asked at a Google interview, or like types of like activities you can do just to get you to like use a different part of your brain.
Okay.
And kids really enjoyed that. And then I got introduced to this curriculum called Exploring Computer Science, ECS. And I think it started out in California. I know that one of the writers, her name is Gail. Forget her last name. I should be able to shout her out, but I can't. But Exploring Computer Science was great because while it didn't go into depth about anything, it was a nice introduction to the range of studies in computer science. So, you had, one unit on HTML and building very basic websites. And it was great because it was accessible for both teachers and for students.
Because it never went too deep.
Never went too deep. It was a nice, like, here's the jargon, here's the purpose, here's what it does. And if you're interested, go explore more. Go figure it out.
Right.
There was a unit on robotics. There was a unit on how the internet is structured. There was a unit on, ethics in computing. It was like a nice entryway into the realm of computing as we know it today.
Yeah, like a survey course.
Literally a survey course, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Why couldn't I think of that phrase? That's exactly what it was. So yeah, and then from there, I got introduced to Microsoft Teals. Actually, that's a lie. I had already known about Microsoft Teals. They're not going to be happy if I say this, but we applied to be in Microsoft Teals, but because of the location of our school, we got denied.
What is Microsoft Teals sending?
Yeah, they send volunteers to your school. So they understand that teachers have limited knowledge and they have a limited time to like really become proficient.
Right.
Because the goal of Microsoft Teals is to master what is called block-based coding and transition that into text-based coding, either learning, JavaScript or Python. But they do that by sending tech professionals who work a traditional job but can volunteer some time in a classroom to help problem solve in the moment.
Yeah.
And our location was just not ideal for someone to say like, hey, I work at Microsoft during the day and I can't necessarily travel to your school.
Where is Microsoft located?
So their headquarters is literally in Times Square. It's on 42nd Street.
Okay, so that's just a ride on the D train.
Yeah. But their volunteers, honestly, come from, even though it's head up by Microsoft, their volunteers come from all over the tech spectrum.
So they might be working in other places.
Yeah, so there were people who
Microsoft
worked at Google and that volunteered for Teals. There were people who worked at Amazon, they volunteered for Teals. But I think in those days, Teals was not as big as it is now. And it didn't work out. It never really worked out. But one day, a colleague of mine met someone who worked at Teals at a bar randomly and talked about that. And we were signed up for Teals within a couple of weeks.
So one of the takeaways that I'm getting is that you need to spend some time at bars and you need to talk up your program that you would like to establish with the help of people who might happen to be at those bars.
Yeah. One thing I've learned in like the many passion projects that I pursue at my school is that you have to be willing and able to just speak up and really network.
Networking. That's what that's called, the thing that I just described.
Yeah. But yeah, like you just have to really tap into a network. And I think that's something that's sometimes hard for teachers to do because we get so wrapped up in our classroom and what our communities need that we don't necessarily think to reach outside of our classrooms and outside of our school. There are so many people and so many organizations that are willing to help, but as a teacher, who has time and who has energy to do all that? Especially
because you're spending all of your time as you're looking for the things that your classroom needs. You're mostly looking internally. Like, do I have another hour that I can spend here? Do I have another? So like you're pretty depleted, and really what often is the thing that you need is to be able to reach out to someone or to a friend of a friend, that sort of thing. And because there are, like you said, there are people out there who are hoping to do some of this work, and they just need to be connected.
Exactly. Yeah. So when we got connected with Microsoft Teals, things grew very quickly because Teals offered the training that we needed. Teals offered training every Saturday. So another teacher and I, we would go to the Microsoft headquarters every Saturday, big fancy breakfast and lunch and classes in coding and lots of collaboration and lots of discussion about what works in our classrooms and what doesn't. And literally it was those Saturday sessions that saved me for that year and that gave me the motivation to like continue building and continue like growing and learning and bringing in more people into this department.
Yeah. So that was a nourishing experience for you personally and not just for your program.
Yeah. Is it possible for something to be nourishing and exhausting at the same time?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, that's what that was. I looked forward to it every Saturday, but I was exhausted by it.
Right. I mean, that's like everybody needs exercise, right? And so that's the, I guess that's what it is.
That is what exercise is. You're right.
So, and this was that year 7 for you?
That's about year 7, yeah.
Okay.
So at that point, we're now getting multiple teachers. This is not an elective anymore. This is growing into...
It's a department, basically.
Yeah, it's growing into a department, and it's becoming a part of the core course offerings at our school.
So it's a requirement for students at this point?
We have not yet adopted that phrase, but that's where it is in practice. It is. We're using it as a survey course currently in 10th grade. Just to say, like, this is a possibility. But due to another series of other logistical issues, it kind of feels like a requirement for some kids, which is sometimes part of the problem problems that
Right.
arise from this.
Right. Like you said, this was an elective.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Number of times I've heard that
Yeah.
phrase. Yeah. I did not elect to be here.
Exactly. Exactly.
But as a survey course, it sort of makes sense that you would want to get it out to as many students as possible, because even if you don't realize that this is something that you want to do, oftentimes just being in the survey course will lead you to realize that that's something you do want to do, and so you go on to pursue other classes, which I assume is why you needed a team. And
Yes.
so what were these other classes like starting in year 7, year 8?
So they became significantly more technical, less
Gotcha.
explorative, and significantly more technical. So it required that we spend a lot of time actually learning multiple answers to the problems we were posing. Because one of the hardest things about teaching computer science is like there's no answer key. Right? You know one way to solve a problem, the way that you solved it, but in the moment when a kid figures out a solution to an issue, you have to read that line by line or
Right.
block by block to
Can't just
help
say
them.
wrong.
Yeah. No, you can't. Right? Or you ask a series of questions to get them to verbalize what the potential issue might be, but it's very time consuming. It's not like any of the traditional courses that many of us teachers are used to teaching. And in that way, it's very informative for your own pedagogy. You start realizing that things are happening in this classroom that should be happening across all classrooms, right? Like
Right.
kids are working together without the need for a teacher. Students are creating their own problems and solving the problems that they created.
Right.
The mini lesson is extremely mini if it exists at all, right? Like,
Right. So
kids-
it's
yeah,
a
it's great.
sort of project-based, or it sounds like the project-based class.
It is. It's the project-based class, and it's also, while there is some instruction, it is like the ultimate like self-paced course. It's like you're working at the rate at which you can figure this thing out, and you're utilizing the resources that are available to you if you want them. The great thing about computer science that I don't necessarily see in my other courses is that there are resources to help kids, but they don't want them. They want to
Right.
sit and figure this out. Like
Right,
they
once
want
you-
that satisfaction.
Once you have like the basic set of tools, like you need to know how to like close a window, probably. You need to know how to open a program.
Yep.
But once you have the basic rudiments, probably a lot of it is like you pick up one thread and it takes you to the next thread. And,
Yep.
and that
That's
sort of thing.
exactly how it works. Yep.
That's a lot like the music production classes that I teach, where it's very clear that you need a basic foundational set of skills, and you need to be able to use your tools at a very basic level. But once you can, it's the making of the stuff with the tools that teaches you the rest of it.
Exactly. Kids love that too. They see that overlap between the language that is being used in their music class and sometimes even their math class, seeing it in computer science. So like we introduced the idea of loops and nested loops, and they're like, oh, we learned that in music, right? And it's like we talk about functions, and they're like, oh, is that like the function in math? So it's like it brings the applied nature of learning like to real life. It exists outside of the textbook now. Like I can actually use those things to create something.
Right.
It's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there is such a productive overlap between a lot of these courses, and there's so much potential. I don't think we've really tapped into it at all. But there's so much potential for figuring out how to develop integrated courses and cross-curricular, cross-dimensional courses.
Well, if I were a better programmer, there are so many things that I would want to build and so many things that I would want to help kids build.
Yeah.
So right now we have very basic things that we have students build. We have kids build attendance trackers that we use in class, random name generators. I mean, and that's, they're able to celebrate that stuff. But I would love if like we were able to build something that said like in history class, what if the 3/5 compromise was the 4/5 compromise, right? Like, what effects would that have had? And like use data to think about like how would that have affected voting patterns going forward? How would that have affected like property ownership and taxes and all that stuff? Just thinking about like just presenting a problem to kids in multiple classes and having them use, their tech skills to figure things out would be amazing.
Right. And I mean, just recognizing the impact of that particular point in history and like the nature of the compromise would that ends up being sort of like an understood prerequisite to being able to use those tools.
Exactly.
And so there's a like, why do I need to know this? Well, a couple reasons, but like most proximately in order to understand how to build your algorithm.
Exactly. That's it. I walked into a science class at the beginning of the pandemic, and I remember the teacher was trying really, really hard to explain like how COVID would spread. And in that moment, I was like, Jesus, like if a kid could just like program this, like, and just see how like the likelihood of this thing spreading if these conditions were true, and like change those
manipulate
things,
variables,
variables. Like if we had the prowess to do that and kids could visibly see what she was explaining, or they could build it and figure it out on their own, like how much more memorable that discussion would have been. Right. And it's just like, I think all teachers should have some level of familiarity with computer science concepts, because
they're problem solving concepts.
They're problem solving concepts. They are. They are what math. I think being exposed to computer science helps me understand the people who love math significantly more. You always have that teacher who thinks math is beautiful. Math is amazing. It's this language. You don't quite understand it. And it's like, I get it now, right? Because like Python is a language and it's beautiful and it's amazing. You can do a lot of things with it and you can understand the world with it. And that's what math teachers and math enthusiasts have been saying forever.
Right. So it's just that they have been using the language in a way that that math in general in school, you're not. Let me not generalize, because I've got math teacher friends who I think are probably doing a good job of this, but in general, like when you. Okay, my high school experience, how about that? Algebra 2, I did not know what that was for. Calculus, I did not know what that was for.
Right.
I didn't solve a single problem in my own life with that, with that stuff. But there are problems to be solved with it if you have that orientation towards it.
Exactly, right? And like computer science allows you to put that stuff to use, right? It allows you to see it. I remember being in calculus and my teacher started talking about a z-axis. And I was like, what is that? Like,
surely that doesn't exist.
Right. There's no way that thing exists. Like what you said X and Y my whole life. But like had my teacher back then had, the tech skills to just quickly build that and show us what that Z-axis was, I could have imagined that significantly more easily.
Right. Languages.
Yeah.
That is... So as a music teacher, that's something that I'm having to think about every so often, because like music is not actually a language. People talk about music being a language. It does have some linguistic properties, but it is not a language, right? There are a lot of things that you can do with music and a lot of things that you can convey with music, but it's not really a language. But that said, it is something that you pick up a lot more easily as a young person, and you can pick it up much faster than you can if you come to it later in life. And there are some aspects of a developing brain, especially in like the first year of brain development, where if you hear certain sounds, you're going to be able to, and if you hear them regularly, then they mean more to you than if you hear them later in life. Like there are, when I was living in India, there were some like aspects of the language of Nepali, which was like the local, what folks were speaking where I was living, where like aspirated syllables just didn't mean anything to my ear. And it took a really long time to start to be able to hear the difference between an aspirated ah sound versus just a regular ah sound.
Can you demonstrate?
I probably can't. I'm trying to think of it's been a really long time since I spoke any Nepali. Let's see. Okay, so gar versus gur, and I'm mangling that to within an inch of its life. That's definitely not how you're supposed to say the different. So like,
but I hear it.
Yeah, so like gari is like a vehicle, right?
Okay.
So if you're like waiting for the gari, you're waiting for the taxi on the corner, right? Whereas merogar is like my house. It's a house. So
There's a very slight difference there.
yeah, and I'm exaggerating it because like that's the only way I know how to do it. But when you're listening to it, it's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
So that's like a big old tangent just to say that you mentioned that the kids were picking up their computer science stuff much faster than you would have expected, and maybe like faster than you were.
Definitely faster than I was.
And I wonder if that might be the younger brains and the linguistic aspects of coding.
It's definitely the younger brains. There's probably a better phrase for this, but it's the brains that have not yet been tainted by like standards and expectations. So like what I find is that the students who actually do best in computer science are the students who teachers think yell out ridiculous things in other classes, right?
Okay.
And I mean that so like you need that unconventional thought process.
Right.
You need to see
Okay.
things through a completely unfiltered lens.
So it's the creativity, like the testing creativity for like how many connections can you make that
Yeah.
don't meet the eye right away. Okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like what some kids consider to be common sense literally takes 40 minutes for another kid to figure out. But then the very next day, they're looking at another kid like, why don't you get this? And it's like, it's really amazing to see because, you know, sometimes when you're in math classes, like the kid who's good at math is the kid who's good at math sometimes.
Right.
And like the kid who's not good at math, unless we start a brand new unit that where everyone is unfamiliar, I don't often get the chance to feel like I'm good at this. Like but in computer science, no one's good at this.
Right.
At least yet. Like we're at this stage where no one's good at this. Not
Yeah.
even your teacher. Your teacher has no idea what they're doing. At least I did it. I shouldn't speak for all of them, but it's like that feels good in a classroom. That feels good to be the one to yell out like, I got it. I figured it out, mister. Like, I got this.
Right. Anybody has the potential to be the star.
Anybody. And you can sense the shock in the room sometimes. It's like, what? Wait, are you sure?
Right.
And then like, you would think that when one kid got it, the answer would spread, but it doesn't. It's like, oh, he got it. Let me like double down and figure this out.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting component of it is this idea of like collaboration and cheating. That it's a different conversation in a comp sci classroom. They're not used to like you actually can walk over there and see how he did it and use that. There are completely open source libraries out there for you to like use. That's perfectly okay. Because they get in trouble for plagiarizing all the time. So it's just interesting. It opens up a completely different space in their mind and a completely different physical space in the school. So it's been a journey.
I imagine it's much more like how things happen in real life as far as collaboration goes too, because like, I mean, no, you can't publish someone else's work as your own. That is plagiarism. But if you are working on a team with other people, the expectation is that you're sharing your progress, and you might specialize in one aspect of the project, but someone else might specialize in some other aspect.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the nice way of putting it. And quite honestly, some of the best ideas are stolen ones, right? So like it happens sometimes. It happens that like, you know, I wasn't necessarily collaborating with them, but I heard what they said. I'm going to take that and build something better. And it breeds this sense of innovation in the room and this sense of idea. Like, of course you want to teach kids to credit where they heard it from, but I'm not angry. Like, honestly, like if it sparks something in your brain and you go in a completely different direction and you learn from it in this classroom, perfectly okay.
Right.
Like,
now, I have to ask, is that a truly universal thing in computer science, or is it just that you were getting trained at Microsoft on Saturdays?
ooh, you know, that is the story of Windows 95, isn't it? Yeah, it's also the story of graphic user interface. I mean, Steve Jobs was a thief as well, self-professed. So it might be the story of computer science, honestly.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll take it. thus concludes part 1 of episode 32 of Professional Development, the New York City Teacher Podcast. If you are enjoying what you're hearing, be sure to join us at patreon.com/professional development for part 2 of this conversation. We hope to see you there, and if not, we'll catch you same time, roughly, same place next week.